Hi, everyone. Welcome to Robust American Love. My name is Karin Karbiener, and I am president of the Walt Whitman Initiative. We are a 501c3 organization, and our mission is always to celebrate New York City's literary legacy and further, as we'll see today. We do serve as an organizing center for cultural activism and poetry-related events, just like this one that you're just about to enjoy. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and please do tune into our YouTube channel, and you'll see a lot of presentations that we've been doing since, what was it, August 2020, basically every month, bringing in different voices that are forwarding all sorts of really remarkable ways to hear poetry, specifically often to hear Walt Whitman's poetry. If you like what we're doing, please do visit our website, waltwhitmaninitiative.org. You'll see a support us link. We always appreciate it. This is a completely volunteer organization built on the love of poetry. In fact, Tristan Pullen is joining me here. Nothing would happen if Pullen wasn't pulling the strings. Hey, Tristan.
Good one.
So Tristan is joining us, and I'm going to introduce our guest in a moment. But Tristan, I'm really grateful for you enabling the show. As Tristan knows, we offer the speaker series, and we're very proud of the word speaker. It's not a lecture series. It's basically a very informal series, very public facing, conversational. We're thinking about Whitman, bringing him into the 21st century, different ways of thinking about his poetry. So there's conversations with teachers, poets, painters, musicians, as we have today, neighborhood activists. They're not designed to be academic talks, but really free, open, and informal discussions. And we hope that you would like to take part also. If you have questions and you're listening to us live, totally on YouTube, you can post your questions to the chat and Tristan will help us see those. A few announcements, guys, before we get to it. We are in Whitman season, as many of you probably know, and with that always comes our Song of Myself marathon, in which we get 52 volunteers to do their own interpretation of the 52 sections of Whitman's masterwork, Song of Myself. We've been doing it 19 years, so this is our 19th year doing the Song of Myself marathon. And on June 19th, from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be doing it online. So you all who have been following us know that during COVID, we took it online, and it was a huge success because we had poets from all over the world, people reciting Whitman in Iceland and Denmark and China and, you know, every country you can imagine. And we really loved that. So we're unwilling to give that up. At the same time, we really love our Brooklyn Bridge Marathon in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And we are looking to do both this year. So as I said, June 19th, please join us online for the online version of the Song of Myself marathon. And pretty soon you'll be seeing announcements and a really beautiful poster at our website about this free and open event. And also stay tuned for more news about our Brooklyn Bridge Park Marathon. Sometime in September, we should be hearing from the Conservancy any day now on that particular date. There's a lot of other things going on because of Walt's birthday, which is coming up this May 31st, always right around Memorial Day. So a little bit complicated for people, but sometimes creating a really nice longer weekend. And I myself, because I'm in the UK, I'm going to be enjoying the, gosh, I don't even know what number it is, but the annual Whitman Walk up in Bolton in Yorkshire. So those of you who are listening, who are within traveling distance of the UK, there's a whole bunch of really wonderful things going on that weekend. Friday, May 27th, I want to say. Friday, May 27th is the day that everything kicks off. And in the Bolton Museum, I will be doing a do-it-yourself Leaves of Grass bookmaking workshop. So first come, first served with those of you that sign up. But I will go over the making of the extraordinary first edition of Leaves of Grass, and everyone participating will get a bookmaking kit and learn the basics of bookmaking as Whitman practiced them. So again, that's 3 to 5 p.m. on the 27th at the Bolton Museum. And the next day, on Saturday, May 28th, is the annual Whitman Walk, which I think has been going on since 1884 with a couple of breaks. Whitman, as you guys know, if you listen to the Paul Salveson talk, has had a stronghold of followers in Northern England, especially in socialist England, since the 1880s, way before Americans appreciated Whitman. They were really honoring Walt up there. So that's what's going on up there. There's also going to be an extraordinary performance by our friends Compagnia de Columbari. They're going to be doing a Whitman on Walls performance in that evening of Saturday, May 28th. So again, if you all can make it, really exciting stuff up in Northern England. Just in other news, as we are kind of preparing for Whitman season, I just wanted to remind you all about our Whitman Library, our Taine Poetry Library that we've been building, all on power of donations, started really by our friend Susan Taine, and St. Francis College Library kicked in, the Library of America sent us books, individual donors have been sending us books. It has been absolutely fantastic. And we've partnered with Fulton Stall Markets down in the seaport of New York City to actually have a physical space for a poetry library. No need for any institutional affiliation. Just walk in, have a seat, grab some local goodies from downstairs, Fulton Stall Markets, and sit and look at a view of the Brooklyn Bridge while you read a great poem. Pretty soon, Andrew Rimby, who is the curator librarian, will actually have a soft opening of the Whitman Library. And then this fall, we're hoping during the Brooklyn Book Festival to officially open it up to the public. So we're really proud of that. And we hope that interests you too. So please check it out on our website. Today, very excited to have Rob Paterson with us today. And just as a preface to what we will be talking about, as Rob and I were just casually chatting about, Whitman has been set an extraordinary amount of times by composers around the world. Here in England, you always hear Ralph Vaughan Williams' Sea Symphony on the radio, right? Inspired by some of Whitman's Sea Drift poems. And then in the States, oh my gosh, it runs the gamut. And I think at last count by scholars, it's over 1,200 settings. That means individual poems that have actually been set to music. And one of the things I want to talk about with Rob is why, right? Like why do composers really love Whitman? A little bit counterintuitive because Walt doesn't rhyme, he doesn't always have a regular meter. So, maybe you'd expect something that's a little bit more regular to appeal, but it's Whitman. And in 2015, Rob, who is an incredibly talented musician, he's been called the modern day master by AXS.com. He's won multiple awards. I'm looking at a list here. His works have appeared on National Public Radio's Best of the Year list for classical music and regularly appear on radio playlists across the United States. The Classical Recording Foundation at Carnegie Weill Hall named Paterson Composer of the Year. So Rob is a multi-talented musician with and composer with so many accolades. It's no wonder that in 2015 he was asked to do a commission by the Gulf Coast Symphony down in Florida. They didn't tell him what to do, but he chose Whitman. So he wrote in 2015 a piece called Whitman's America, which is basically a setting of 6 individual poems for baritone and soprano soloists. And I think the chorus and orchestra are also in there. A really beautiful, huge piece that we will be listening to in parts and talking to Rob about. And I did want to flag sort of this hot news item that November 15th at Carnegie Hall this year, the Oratorio Society of New York will be performing Whitman's America. So if you are in New York City, and I will be there, woohoo! Tristan, you have to come and visit me then so we can go on a date together and check this out, because that's an extraordinary place to hear music. And especially if it's inspired by Whitman and written by such an amazingly talented musician and composer. Rob, welcome to Robust American Love.
Hi, thank you so much, Karin. And I think I want to hire you as my PR agent. Thank you for all that. I really appreciate the compliments.
Oh, no, they're all deserved. And I'm just looking, I actually checked out your website, Rob. You all can go to it as well out there, robertpaterson.com. Just remember to leave off one of the
One
T.
T. You know, there's and I always feel like I'm plugging the other guy, but there's another composer with 2 T's. So if you type that, you'll end up getting him, and that's fine. He's also an excellent, well, he's an excellent composer. So it's okay to be grouped with him, but yeah, a little different.
That's so crazy, Rob. What an insane story. I mean, have you guys thought about working together?
Not so much, although actually a few months ago, we were both in the same program. There was a vocal concert program hosted by Opera Memphis, and he lives in Memphis, and that's where he's from. And so I was on the program with one of my pieces, and he was right after me. And so our pieces were right on top of each other, almost the same spot. Just a weird coincidence where we were both sitting kind of next to each other. It was a little weird, and we've known each other for years, but it was funny. It's it's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure Walt Whitman ever ran into another Walt Whitman, right? So be
actually there
yes?
was. I mean, because I've done a lot of work on the directories, like there were no telephone directories, obviously, but there were address directories during Whitman's time. And there was actually another Walter Whitman living in Brooklyn. Tristan, do you know?
That's
so
amazing.
It's seldom talked about, and I always thought I should just like write a piece about it, but it's spelled the same way though, Rob. So there's not the kind of tricky, nice business you have.
No. That seems a little unfortunate, maybe a little bit, for that other Walt Whitman. I'm hoping he wasn't a poet, right, or a writer. I hope.
No, he was not. I forgot they listed their professions actually in these directories, and it was some working profession. But to me, I would think that Walt would totally seek that guy out, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
It's like absolutely. A double, or maybe he put him in the directory. Who knows?
Yeah, right. Of course. Anyway, well, thank you again for your wonderful compliments. I appreciate it.
Well, you were called to attention to us by our good friend Cynthia Shore at the Birthplace, who actually hooked you and I up, and I thought it's such a great opportunity for us to hear a piece. I know it's out there already, but to also hear it live, I guess, is a really big deal, right? Like, I guess that's the dream of a composer. So
yeah, I mean, we all love great recordings; those are fun, or great videos. But I think, especially having been through what we've been through for the last couple of years or few years, live is where we all want to be if we can. Just because it's so much fun to hear when you hear sound in a big hall and you're with people, hundreds or even thousands, it just it's a different experience than sitting in your living room or your office or your car or whatever. So I think for me, music is a communal experience. I like to commune with people and feel like a sense of, I don't know, like you're in a community in a village or a city or whatever. Which kind of ties a little bit into some of Walt Whitman's poetry, I guess, but at least for me. But that's that sense of wholeness. There's a wholeness there that I don't think you necessarily get from being all by yourself all the time. And I love solitude too, I do. But for me, I create music to be shared with others. I try not to create in a vacuum.
Well, that's wonderful. And I guess we're not exactly listening to it live, but we are listening to some of your work communally.
Yeah, and it's a live performance, so we're maybe one step removed, so yeah.
Excellent. And we've got Tristan here too, who's going to help cue it up, but I'm excited because I guess we decided that the way in would be just to hear a part of Whitman's America.
Sure.
And we will be hearing the piece, I guess, for the baritone. I Dreamed.
Yeah. So the way the piece is structured is it's about 20 minutes. Or maybe a little longer. And there's two parts.
The whole thing is that long.
The whole thing is about that. Yeah. It's for chorus, orchestra, and like you said, two vocal soloists. What you're going to hear, I think Tristan will play first, is one of the two parts that's just for a solo singer. And those they're pretty short. I think like 2 to 3 minutes long or whatever each. And so one is for soprano and one is for baritone. And what you'll hear now, I think, is the baritone solo, which is a vocal setting of I Dreamed in a Dream, one of his poems. So that's that one.
Beautiful. Thank you. So Tristan, if you would be so kind as to cue it up. And I guess the whole idea is that listeners out there, sit back, chill out, and relax. We're going to listen to this beautiful piece about 2 minutes long. And then we have the composer here to help us navigate through it. So.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wow, I saw Tristan, you sort of just fall into a beautiful trance there. You could let the music wash over you. And Rob, I must say this is the perfect way to begin because Robust Love is actually in there. That's the name of this show.
Oh, good. Perfect. Excellent. Mission accomplished.
Well, it was stunning.
Thank you.
I felt like, Karin, I don't even know if you know this about me, but in undergrad, I studied classic music, vocal training.
I did not
So
know
like,
that.
I'm a baritone. So like, that was just.
Cool. Oh, wow. That's great. Okay.
So it was just it gave me goosebumps all over. So
wow.
There is something about the baritone, right? Like that hits it, especially with Walt. I feel like, of these settings, when I hear that tone, I think of Whitman. He must have been a baritone.
Did you know, maybe you know this, there's, I think only a single, and I could be wrong about this, but I think there is one single scrappy recording of him reading something. And I heard it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure you know way more about it than I do. But I heard it. His voice is a little bit higher, maybe tenory. I listened to it though. I wanted to hear his voice. I was so intrigued to hear him read anything, that we have even that, but it was fun. I mean, it's always fun to hear somebody reading their own work, even a little bit.
Cool thing for a composer who has set Whitman to actually hear the voice. The story of that recording, Rob, is that it is possible that it is Whitman. It's not.
Oh no,
proven.
Might not.
But I actually believe it. And the story is that Thomas Edison, when he invented the recording cylinder, sent out a lot of his disciples to record famous people. So there's a lot of these recordings around that time in the 1880s, 1890s. And that recording was apparently done sometime before Whitman's death, maybe 1890, 91. Whitman died in 1892.
Right.
So what you hear maybe is a falsetto that comes with age.
Okay. Got
it. I'm not sure that's his robust American voice.
Yep.
Like of, the Whitman in his prime, but he does, he does have a very high, like at least high register in that.
Well, and by the way, that's an interesting, just a quick side discussion about, well, first of all, a lot of singers, Tristan might know this, but sometimes when singers age, their voices actually get lower. Like a tenor would get to more, they call it like a baritenor, like they start going baritone a little bit, but because their vocal cords start to loosen up. The second thing though, is you might be right about the falsetto-y thing and also the tinniness of the recording, because back then with the cylinders, they weren't the most accurate devices at capturing audio, so the audio was a little bit tinny. And so that could have been it too. There could have been a whole mix of issues, or his voice really was falsetto-y just because he was old and about to go, Anyway, it was fun to hear. I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe it's false, but I'll keep imagining it was him just for fun,
We want him as a baritone for whatever, he really projects that.
He projects baritone, doesn't he?
Quality,
I think Whitman, let's imagine that he was probably a deep, robust, almost like a bass baritone, just like standing on a mountain, like reciting. I imagine that a little bit, there's the power of that, So the romanticism of imagining a creator, and so a funny story. this is just a weird aside. I studied with a composer named Christopher Rouse, who was a pretty well-known American composer. And I was lucky enough to visit his home in Baltimore. And I always imagined, because he writes these big, huge orchestra pieces, that he worked in like a castle and there were dark, stormy clouds over his house or something, I don't know what. And it turns out he works in his living room. He has a little Casio keyboard in front of him. And he works at like a little card table. Totally not what you'd imagine with the bigness of his music. It was actually kind of tiny. And I was like, wow, okay. So the surroundings don't necessarily have to match the art, I guess. It's like so much of it comes from inside,
That's really, may I ask where this piece was composed?
This piece, so this piece was, I wrote it in New York, here, and well, you're in London, but here in New York, and in my apartment. So, my office or my studio where I work is just part of the apartment, and it's fine. Nothing spectacular, I guess. Yeah, that's about it. But I did take, when I read his poetry, I'd go outside sometimes in the park and read it. Just I like feeling like, especially the poems that are about nature. I want to kind of be in nature. I mean, it's almost like method acting, but method studying, I guess. So that was fun. But yeah, I didn't like write it in some fancy place, unfortunately, just an office.
Well, I personally would call New York City a fancy place. So.
Yes, well, I love New York. Yeah,
but
I did write.
As a New Yorker, yeah.
I did write it at a piano though, so sometimes I have a piano in front of me when I'm composing, and I write on the desk of the piano like that. So I have a Steinway, and that's fun. Yeah, but that's how I did it. It took me, I guess, a few months to write.
I actually really love that you composed it in New York, because the poem itself, I Dreamed in a Dream, is a poem about a great future city, right? That he's envisaging. And I know he says a city of friends.
Right.
A lot of us think this is code for just a place where everybody is safe, right?
Yep.
To love whoever you want, whether you're gay, straight, whatever it is, because he himself was working through that, right? As a gay man, just figuring out where he could love and why there are rules about that. So the poem is a beautiful celebration of what an urban place can give you, right? Like a certain freedom, even though you're confined in buildings and streets, but a certain kind of freedom to express yourself. And I've always thought New York was a good place to do that. So very cool that this piece kind of got engendered in that city that I feel like was in the back of his mind.
And it's funny, in this piece, I tried, like you said, I had a selection of poems that I used for the piece to set. And I wanted to, first of all, choose a wide swath of poems that I felt like touched on different themes that he was passionate about. So whether it was, brotherly love, or being, in a city feeling safe, or nature, there's a lot of nature-oriented poems. I felt like I couldn't do everything, of course, and I had to be a little economical, and I also, this piece has a sense, like an arc form. So even though it's kind of playful, there's nothing about his poems that would allude to this at all. But I tried to structure it like almost like a day. So there's kind of like a morning feel in the beginning. It goes through a day, and at the end, kind of ends like as if you're in a sunset or at the end of the day. And I also kind of loosely thought of his life, and although there's nothing in narrative about his life in there to speak of, but just thinking about how I was trying to create a sense of structure out of these disparate poems, and I read that whole deathbed edition, the one that I had.
Very nice. That's over 400 poems.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, no, I read, sleepy sometimes. Sometimes I wasn't paying attention for some of them, admittedly. But no, I would sit there with little Post-it notes and mark. I started with probably 100 or 50 or something, some large amount. And then I started whittling it down. And then I got down to 20 and then 10. And then I finally found the ones that I thought would work well together, And also just figuring out which one, okay, if I want one for a soloist, like the one you just heard, well, would that work better for a choir or for a solo singer? And that one, I just thought a solo singer with a choir echoing, like people in a city almost echoing the voice of one, and so I thought that was an interesting pairing in that one, Whereas the other one, there's one other solo for the female singer, the soprano. I thought that one for me was more about color, and I didn't want to hear the choir as much as just hearing the shimmer of her voice and the shimmer of the orchestra, because she talks about luminous light and all these other things. And I just thought that was really pretty, So anyway, that's how part of the process of how I tried to go about choosing some of his poems, because there's a ton, there's so many, it's overwhelming.
There Go ahead, Tristan.
You know, the first thing that came to me when I started having this very visceral moment listening to this was probably the first time I was sitting in a theater and I listened to the last number of Candide, Make Our Garden Grow, where it's like this beautiful arc of like, we've gone through all the insanity of Candide, but then at the end, there's this like resonance of like, when you said the passage of time of a day, of that we're all coming home. Like, and when someone asked me the other day, how would I describe Whitman's work? I said, it's poems that guide us all home, that we're all going somewhere. It's not a race, we're going. And I felt like that song, it was especially like the tail end of it, like he's not singing, but the music is guiding us along this path of like something that's hopeful. Like it is the sunset or the sunrise and night's coming, and night doesn't mean darkness. Like it was just this beautiful composition of it all. So
thank you. Wow,
you sold me. You're my favorite composer right now.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm flattered. Thank you. And I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Tristan is bringing up some good points, and I really love your idea of doing a day, like the story of a day in a song. Whitman did that too, in several poems, and notably for me, there's a poem called There Was a Child Went Forth, which is actually one of the 12 original poems in the first edition of Leaves of Grass.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it
My
starts
favorite poem too.
What's that, Tristan?
My favorite of Walt's.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sort of rite of passage poem, right? It like takes you through basically Whitman's life. And it starts early in the morning, but it's also springtime, and you go through a summertime and kind of like a really challenging moment that I think, Tristan, you and I gravitate towards, where Walt talks about the blow, the quick, loud word. You get a feeling that he was abused maybe by his father. And then it kind of drifts off at the end into sort of like an incredible cinnamon colored sunset over Long Island. And I think you thinking about patterns like that, like a day in the life, is actually very Whitmanic, to have some sort of sense of arc like
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, I tried, I mean, I would never suppose to get inside Walt Whitman's head, because I don't know. I mean, you've studied him 1,000% more than I have, but I did think, but I did try to think from a creative standpoint, like try to create a few parallels that made sense, and I think, it's funny. This is maybe an interesting thing to bring up, but all those settings, so many composers have set as poems to music. You said a comment before, which I found really interesting, about how a lot of his, or maybe almost all of his stuff, or all of it, doesn't rhyme. And that's interesting to me, because a lot of 20th century composers gravitate, and I'm talking classical music, gravitate towards setting poems that don't rhyme, actually. It's kind of different than music theater or pop music, where that's usually more normal. And even today, it's a little bit more normal, although not always the case. But I think for me, you try to find flow in the music without having necessarily have, rhyming schemes, and so that to me was appealing. I liked it.
I guess that gives you some freedom for your creativity too, that you don't have to fit it into a box somehow, right?
Yeah, and I think it's more than you start to get into the feeling of the poem, and not thinking that you have to abide by a structure that's kind of imposed, by the structure of the poem. Although, by the way, and I feel strongly about this, and I'm very kind of, I wouldn't say religious, but like maybe obsessed with this, that I don't like messing with poets' poems, and I like to try to keep them intact. And maybe I'll repeat a line here and there. That's about as far as I'll go, or maybe a word for emphasis, which is always weird. You even feel weird about that as a composer, because you're like, well, how would the poet feel if he were alive, if he heard me do that? But I think most poets understand that for musical emphasis, once you add music to it, you're turning it into something different, and you're not distracting from the original form. You're just creating a new version of it that you can hear differently. That's all. Because I think all of his poems are absolutely stunning by themselves, but this is just another way of hearing them, maybe with a little more, I don't know, musical color or something, but it's scary. It's scary to think that if you were alive, what if you would have hated it? I mean, it's almost comforting when the poet's gone. He's like, okay, I don't have to worry that he's going to show up at a concert. But actually, knock on wood, I've had good luck with poets. So far, nobody's said to me yet, oh God, Rob, that was awful. So
yeah, well, I noticed that
yeah.
you have set quite a few poets, right? Whitman is
Right.
not the only one.
Yes.
I saw Rita Dove and Carl
Mhm.
Sandburg and Thoreau. So
Mhm.
maybe could you bring us into your world a little bit? Like you are a musician and yet you have obviously a predilection to poetry. I know
Mhm.
that your parents were also painters, so that is part of
Mhm.
the picture too. I
Mhm.
mean, how did you become a musician?
Well, I think when I was a kid, I was in, early teens, like 13 or something. I hate to say this, but it's true. I thought, well, maybe if I was a percussionist, I played drums and I started playing drum set. I thought, maybe if I played drum set, girls will like me. That's what I was thinking back then. And it was the truth. And I'm like, I'll take drums. I'll be cool. I'll play in a rock band. Maybe that'll work. Kind of failed. I don't think it worked much. It didn't work till later, till I actually got married. So that was great. That eventually worked. I married a violinist. So I guess she thought I was intriguing enough. But anyway, but then the more I got into it, my parents loved classical music and were both artistic. Like you said, my dad is a sculptor and ran the sculpture department at SUNY Buffalo for 35 years. And so he would take me to classical concerts all the time and new music concerts because he loved going.
Is
And
he
so
listening now?
I don't know, because they're not very tech savvy and they're in their 80s. And every time I mention how to do this,
anyway,
I'll probably sit with them and show them on my laptop because they're like, how do I turn this on? Like that kind of thing. So
now
I
limit your negative thoughts if you're going to do that, please.
What's that? Yeah, right. Yeah, it'll be. I'll show them later. But anyway, they took me to a lot of concerts, and that was kind of part of my upbringing. And as far as poetry, I don't think there were some books of poetry on the shelves here and there. Like I know my mom grew up in Boston, so there's an Anne Sexton book because she was there for a while, and so she had things like that. But eventually in college, and as I kept going, I fell in love with poetry. And also, of course, I wanted to write songs and didn't want to always write my own text because I'm not a great text writer in my own opinion. So I was like, well, I'll try to set some poems. And so I started starting more of them and started getting into it. So now I've done, I think, quite a few. And I love it. I love doing it. I try to be as sensitive as I can to the way a poet writes their work, and constructs the poems because I revere them. I'm the kind of composer that likes to support the poem and not disintegrate it. I want to try to highlight what's already in there and not try to turn it into something it's not,
That is noteworthy to me because we have talked to many composers on this program, and a lot of composers just use it as a basis, right? And they go forward from there and change the words, right? Because there is, it's not copyrighted. You can do whatever you want with Whitman. So repeating or taking out passages you're not as crazy about, but you stress this sort of like, you want to be true to the original vision.
I do. Yeah. I feel strongly about that. And like I said, if I feel like I really need it, I might repeat something or I did in that one song you just heard where I echoed like City of Friends with the choir, more like an echo. But that to me didn't seem like I'd like to think that I wasn't maybe turning his poem into something it wasn't. I was more just kind of emphasizing something because musically, that's part of when you're reading something through, listening to something in a span of time and listening with other sound around it. Sometimes that just helps to emphasize something. But again, what I won't do, and I never do this, I never take out a poet's words. I don't remove anything. I've never done that. I just don't like the idea. I feel like I don't have the right to do that. I just wouldn't do it. I feel like it's sacrilege. So every composer is different. Some do that. I don't feel right doing it. And I would never add any words either, like things that don't exist. I just want the poem to exist as much as possible intact, But maybe that's, I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's conservative the way I think, but that's the way I think. Yeah.
I don't think it's conservative. When I was writing my play about Walt, I kind of came into the same predicament of how do I emphasize something through dialogue, but not change his words? Mm-hmm. And I think what you're saying is, and Karin and I have talked about this, is I believe Whitman's poetries to be his own personal songs. And that was like the kind of like Greek chorus-esque for my play. But I believe that in a modern day, we often hear things and we skip over them. So you bringing that echo of the chorus coming in, echoing that line, and then him, or in my play, when he repeats it, I think Walt would like it. It's almost ethereal, almost like omnipresent, like he is talking about the very like people and their voices. It's not just his, but it's the voice of America in your own song, and the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. So contribute your verse, whether it's an echo or not.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. I think he was thinking of songs, right? Like a lot of his poems are called songs.
Oh, I know.
He evokes that idea all the time. So he's kind of, for a composer, I would think from that perspective also.
I can't tell you how much I freaked out reading his poems, seeing all the poems that were song of this or song something, and thinking, what am I doing? Like, why am I setting poems that he clearly didn't call songs, yet he has ones that are kind of, he thought of as song-like, or songs, right? It does kind of, it's a little bit of a mind trip. And then you start to doubt at least I started doubting myself a little bit, and then what kept me going is thinking, okay, a lot of composers have done this before with his work. And I just, you have to kind of psych yourself into, at least for me, I had to give myself permission to do that. Because I think if you love a poet's work as much as I love his work, you want to honor it and not go against the grain of what you think he might have tried to do with it in a lyrical way. And his poems are so lyrical. They're so song-like, all of them, actually, almost all of them. They're so, that's why I think a lot of composers set them. Aside from the themes, I think there's something about the lyricism of his writing that's really appealing. It's just so easy to read his stuff and go, oh, that would be so great with music. I mean, because it's so just flows so beautifully. And I don't think all poems, and that's fine. As you know, a lot of poets don't write like that. That's okay. Some are very conversational in a way that's like, oh, I was at my kitchen, drank a cup of tea, drop that. That's fine. That might work in like recitative, as we call it in music, where it's like conversation. But I think if you're creating something song-like or with a choir, it can't always be choppy like that. You want it to have a little bit of flow. And I think his poems work really well for that. So that's why everybody keeps setting them. Well, and then the public domain, that helps too. But they also feel contemporary. A lot of things he's talking about we're talking about now. He was a visionary, right? Yeah. Right. So I think that's part of it too.
This is really good to hear your explanation for it. He was definitely not somebody I would call musically literate. He didn't play an instrument in that. He apparently belted out tunes at the top of the omnibuses, but that's about as professional. He did say in like a random comment that he acted on the stage for a while, which I totally can see. He's very performative, but he was an absolute fan of music. So, when opera hit New York, he was there. And when you listen to poems like Out of the Cradle, Endlessly Rocking, they actually alternate between the sections of the poem, alternate between aria and recitative.
Yeah.
He italicizes actually the recitative.
Recitative, yeah. Well, we say recit too. You can shorten it. We sometimes just go recit. We give it a nickname. Hey, so that might be a good segue into that second excerpt if you want to hear it for a minute.
Yes, we would love to hear it. Actually, do you want to preface it? And actually, you know what, Rob, it would help just to give a table of contents of Whitman's America, the 6 poems you set. Could you just run through them? Do you know them by heart?
Sure. Let me just, I'm going to make sure I don't mess this up and just look at it for a second. Because even though I wrote the piece, hold on a second. So I know people always, you know what people do to composers? They go, hey, that piece that you wrote 20 years ago, measure 62, beat 3. Is that note a C sharp or a C natural? Are you kidding me?
We're not going to do that.
No, I know, but people do that and they're serious. And I'm like, do you really think, okay, I know my music, I think pretty well, but I really have to go back and look at the score, So anyway, so the poems are, okay, so first of all, the way the structure is, and this is on my website too, if you're curious, it's on there with the whole audio and video and everything. There's an introduction, and I set the poem gliding or all, or over. Do you say that way? O apostrophe.
He means over, right? Like gliding
right.
over.
So gliding over all. So that to me was like, he's floating above the world kind of thing, or that way. I dreamed in a dream. Then there's another little musical interlude, and then I hear America singing, which is what we'll play in a moment. Then I set the poem America. Then there's this other little interlude, which is Pure Luminous Color, this poem that another of his poems for the soprano solo. Then a prairie sunset, another little musical interlude, and then finally After the Dazzle of Day, and that's the final one.
Okay, a mix of really famous Whitman poems, and there was a couple in there that I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah, they might be maybe a little more obscure, right?
So what I like actually about it, Rob, is that you handpicked them, right? Like you were, as you said, you read through the deathbed edition and you were just like combing through for the ones that really hit you, that you wanted to work on. Which
and also ones I thought that could work musically. Some poems they're either huge or amazing or just beautiful on their own. And I'm like, I can't do anything with music that'll do anything with that other than the beauty of what it is. Or I did, in full disclosure, like if there are ones that I knew were set a ton, I might have avoided them only because like there's already 20 great settings. So I didn't maybe feel like I had something to add to that, or didn't feel like, doing that. But these, I felt like the collection I picked, I felt strongly about that they worked well together for the kind of imagined narrative that I was trying to come up with,
And maybe thematically speaking, I mean, I can't speak for all of them because I'm not familiar with one or two of them, but it seems like you have kind of like a broad American theme, right? Like echoing the name of these.
Yeah, and exactly, because I was alluding to America, I wanted to go after that kind of almost like I was trying to encapsulate like the nationalism that I felt like that he was going after, like loving this country, but also the nature. And for me, that's really important because a lot of my work is about the outdoors and about nature. So I felt a kinship, like spiritually, I guess, with him with that. Like I was like, oh, he loves that. And I love that too. Like talking about the prairies and sunsets and luminous colors. And I love color in my music. I try to do that. I have lots of timbral color. So that resonated with me. So I try to create like a bridge for myself between his beautiful work and what I was trying to do musically. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. A really beautiful selection of pieces. And can you just prime us for what we're just about to...
So this little excerpt is the setting of I Hear America Singing. And for me, I wanted something really bright, and that, because, even the title itself is really kind of bright and optimistic. And also the music is got a little bit percussive and a little bit active. And because he talks about factory workers and he talks about there's a lot of activity in this poem. So I wanted to emulate that music and make it feel really bustling. So that's what I was going for. Yeah.
Okay. A beautiful short poem that is often included in children's books because it's accessible. It sort of broadly speaks towards Whitman's democratic vision of America. And we are now going to hear Rob Paterson's setting of this from Whitman's America. Thank you, Tristan, for queuing it up.
Here we go.
I say,
Wow, that's huge. Tristan, did you want to add something?
Well, I just, director brain comes out, and I don't know, Robert or Karen, if y'all know of the director. He's famous in Germany, Robert Wilson, but he often plays within opera. But it just seemed that magnitude of heightened reality where I could see a choir singing, but the stylized Whitman moving throughout America and hearing their sounds. And then the brightness of, and I don't know if it was a clarinet or an oboe, but there was like this mix between eighth notes and triplets that were in the middle of it. That was just stunning. That was almost like I am reaching for something that's not here today, but will be there tomorrow. Like it was just, oh, it's so
yeah,
thank you so
that's
much. Wow, thank you.
Beautiful description. That poem to me, Rob, is when Whitman says, "I hear America singing." He means kind of the professions, right? It's not necessarily that people's voices are singing. It's that you hear the cobbler cobbling, and he goes over this. And it struck me that a lot of what you're doing is what is it called again? That kind of music where
there's something in music we call word painting,
right?
Which is when you take from the words, you try to create music that emulates a little bit of what's in the words. So there are moments like when I'm using like a wood block or temple block, like that, these little percussive sounds that sound a little like a cobbler or like hammering something. And it's subtle, it's not supposed to be overt, but it's something that kind of in the back of your mind, if you're not thinking about it, maybe makes you think of something mechanical, or the rhythms are a little jagged. And I was definitely doing that. I was like clear as day, trying to have fun with the words he was in his poem,
and how fun that is. I find that to be, especially for kids who are listening, or if people just if they don't exactly get music, there's a lot you can do with a piece like this, right? To discover it and to kind of like find things that bring you back to the poem. So
right. And by the way, this brings up an interesting point that you said this is a poem that's often used, kids read it. And when setting poems to music, one of the basic things I think a lot of composers often go after, but not always, is that if the poem is too complex, especially with a choir, like it's almost like the bigger it gets with opera choir, the simpler the words have to get. You can't, it's really difficult to set really complex poems. I'll give you an example. There's a poet named Irving Feldman, who's a friend of mine. He's from Buffalo. And his poems are amazing. They're beautiful and they're really complex and super deep, and they have many layers. And he's always like, oh, he wants me to set a few more of his poems. I set one when I was a lot younger. I said, Irving, I love your poetry, but I have a hard time even understanding just reading it. So if I set it to music and people are seeing it for the first time in a concert hall and they only have one time through it, they're just sitting there like that, looking at the words, it's hard to dissect it. And the music adds a whole nother layer to it. So it's almost like the simpler the poem, the better, the easier it is to set, only because people's attention can be on it, right? So it's weird, it's almost strange, maybe counterintuitive, because composers can be so heady about the way they're thinking, but the words end up tending, and that's why, by the way, the best playwrights that try to write opera libretti often write too many words, because they don't leave room for the music to speak. And so they're like, I need to fill every moment. Like, no, you don't. I can do that moment for you. Give me a few words and I will explode that phrase you just did in music, but they're so used to filling it all themselves, so.
Well, and your music, like even we're talking about that day, the imagery of day and passage of time, is that even in this song, it was like America's waking up to sing,
right?
Like the growing sense of music playing in it. But, one thing that I've appreciated about Walt is that he has a act of turning mundane things into something extraordinary. So even like the cobbler and this thing, so you're adding these little moments of music, these bright little notes that are giving us these not sensory overload, but almost like a sensory baptism of allowing us to see America waking up as we're listening to not just the people singing, but the very tools that is making America's economy and government and livelihood go. Like, it's so multi-layered that it's just,
man, you guys are good. I'm getting chills. I'm getting chills at your descriptions.
Wow,
you guys are amazing. Clearly, you're both incredibly talented and literate. Jeez, wow.
You have the Whitman scholar and then the theater kid. So,
you guys are great. Wow, thank you.
More than a theater kid.
Thanks. I mean, I'm really flattered that you heard that, and I'm grateful, because I think I was definitely again, it's like there's multiple layers when you set words to music, whether they're poems or something else. And I try to encapsulate a lot of what you just said in that. And if people leave feeling the poem and maybe, I don't want to say a deeper level, but just maybe a bigger level, like with some more sound all around it and things like that. I really like that as one vision of it. Again, I know other composers have set this, I'm sure, like probably 50, I have no idea, or more.
Rob, where does this occur in Whitman's America? It sounds like an ending piece to me because it's like so big at the end, but like,
I think it's kind of in the middle actually, because I kind of do it like an arc form where it starts out kind of broad and elegiac and then it ends kind of quietly. I don't end it big. So the big part is kind of in the middle. So I guess because there's two poems about America that are kind of back to back, right in this, and the America part is right kind of in the center in a way, you know.
But that kind of makes sense with the passage of time, that like we wake up with the most energy, but during the day, the loudness of the day.
Right. It's like the afternoon, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. The afternoon. And then at night, we're calming down.
Winding down. Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what I was going after.
See, this is what I wish theater could do. And I hope no one sees this.
nice.
But plays want to play on time, and musical does it. But I have only ever found in opera or in choral music that painting time is true. You said the overall time is what, 20, 30 minutes?
It's about, I think, around 20, 25 minutes, maybe. Let me see. The
I
audio
saw
recording.
24 minutes on the website.
Oh, yeah. So it's about maybe 25. That was a little
okay.
off.
So it's 25 minutes.
Right.
Yet you have single-handedly created music that can show us passage of time, but then show us individual lives. But it's like the microcosm and the macrocosm happening in plays. Plays can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen a play. I've never seen a musical do that, but music, opera can do that, and choral music can do that, and a symphony can do it. But that's why I think our bodies react so much to music more than the spoken word alone.
Yeah. Well, poems, what I love, going back to the Whitman's work, and that's amazing what you just said, Tristan. I think his music is his poems are so musical, to me at least, that there's an innate musicality built in, which I love. And it's interesting to me, for me personally, like I try to emulate as much as I can. You know, again, you heard what I just did with that one, where I'm echoing things and repeated a few things here and there for musical effect, but I definitely, I know other composers approach it differently, and they'll dissect things and move things around, maybe even more than I did. It's weird. It's a weird process because the poem is amazing on its own and musical in its own right, and then you're imposing something that's that he, you know, if you heard it, I don't know what he would think. I'd hope he'd enjoy it for what it is.
I think he would worship it. I think he would think it's. I mean, he was such a, I hate to say this about my lovely Walt, but a little bit of a narcissist. So I think that he was, you know, I think he would be in awe of this with his love for opera and music, but also America and the people. I think that he would relish.
Can you imagine if he had been alive to write an opera libretto or to write an entire theater, like a real theater, not just poems, but like he never wrote a play, right? He never wrote a theater piece. Yeah. That would have been, or a movie, even a movie score. Like
did he, Karin?
I don't think so.
No,
right?
he talked about writing one, but he never wrote a play. Yeah. We haven't uncovered one yet, at least. You know, we keep uncovering stuff that
I'm sure. Wrote. I mean, on the level of like Wagner or something huge. I could see, like I said, he was definitely in a good way, I hope, like egotistical. Like he had a big sense of things, right? Yeah. So maybe if he had the wherewithal and the right people approached him, he could have written like a giant opera or something that was really like otherworldly and kind of bigger than life that way with music. That would have been fun, right? Yeah.
Maybe actually he did. It's just our job now to put the music to it.
Right. Well, there's that too, you know.
Or Rob's job, at least.
Yeah, well, I'm trying.
I'll direct it.
Okay.
You know, Rob, the Wagner craze hit New York when Whitman was there. So, you know, I still remember researching on this because I've written about it. And in the newspapers, they routinely put like a big picture of an ear bleeding because some people just like could not take Wagner. But I think
Right.
some of that big sound is,
Mhm.
you can feel it in the poetry as
Mhm.
maybe in your piece, we hear it too. And I actually wanted to mention genre here,
Mhm.
because I know, I think on your website, you say that you are a classical composer.
Mhm.
To me, this piece sort of was, you know, a kind of maybe transitional piece
Mhm.
between genres, because there's almost like a musical feeling to it, right? It feels like you could almost shut your eyes really tight and imagine it in a musical.
Mhm. Well, I
Um,
thank you, and I take that as a compliment. Thank
yeah,
you. Yeah, I think
absolutely.
I imagine I've been described, and I don't mind this at all. I've been described as kind of, well, first of all, narrative. I like to think of narrative in my music from, like time spans, like we were talking about with Tristan. But I also like to think about what is it, like imagery. So there is a lot of imagery, and even when I was writing this music, like if there were certain things that I needed hearing his words and reading them, sometimes I'd put images up on my computer or up on my wall or something just for fun. I think at one point I was looking for images of prairies just for fun, just for inspiration, because I liked it. Oh, there's my desktop. It's a beautiful prairie while I'm writing the prairie movement. Um, but yeah, and I think my writing tends to be pretty lyrical. So there's a sense of line in my vocal writing so that you can usually follow along with it somewhat. Uh, some composers don't write like that, and that's totally fine. It's just different. But I like that. I like the idea of people singing along with it. So that thing, I Hear America Singing, if somebody sang some of those phrases, if they heard it more than once and it's stuck in their ear like an earworm, I'd be happy. Actually, I'd be like, oh, you should hear. I don't, not like a pop song, but maybe just you hum it a little bit.
Yeah.
That would make me happy. Yeah.
The first musical I ever went to growing up was Secret Garden. And my grandmother, I still remember, I was probably 7 or 8. And my grandmother said, okay, I don't know that this is going to be good. The review says you're not going to walk away singing it. And I was walking out singing the soprano number, because
Yeah.
it's that earworm, but that's what your music does. And I think that's what Karin is saying, that musicality, it reminds me of just like the bodiness of and the boldness of something that could be done, that something I've seen, it would seem familiar to be on at the Met, like something that's like, like I saw Otello there a few years ago, and it was just stunning, but it has that same bold, powerful sound where you're expecting a chorus of people to come out and show you Walt's America,
Right.
like,
Well, it
And-
seems
and
perfect to
thinking-
me. I mean, a choir and an orchestra for some of these poems, well, at least hopefully all of them the way I set them. But I mean, he's so bigger than life in so much of what he writes. And he talks broadly. You can almost see him waving his arms or gesturing towards like the whole continent, right? It's like he's like if I imagine like 1,000, 10,000 feet in the air and going there like that. And he's like looking out over prairies or, yeah, it's wild to read his stuff because he just had this giant sense of things, people, space, area, the country as a whole. And it's so compelling and it's so appealing.
When Whitman was living in New York and listening to all this music, he came out with an article called Art Singing and Heart Singing, which was a review of some of the more famous family singing troupes that were traveling around the country at the time. And he was a huge fan of the Hutchinson family singers, which was a really big old family from the Midwest, but beautifully vocally trained. And basically a chorus, right? Like a family chorus. So that sound, which I think you are integrating in this piece, because I guess that's where, when I listen to it, that's where it takes me. It's not just opera, right? Which is considered kind of like a higher art, but it's also about the people, which in that way really reflects the poem very nicely. There's a democracy to it that it doesn't sound exclusive. It sounds like it's inclusive.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I think opera, it's funny how opera and Tristan will, I think, get this right away, being a singer. Opera and chorus or choir tends to get clumped together. But the funny thing is they're very different. And the choir world as a world is very collective and communal, whereas the opera world is very, I don't want to say exclusionary, but it definitely has. And by the way, I write operas. In fact, I have an opera rehearsal like literally 15 minutes after we get done here, I think.
Wow.
I'm in this building right now in New York here. And It's not, and I try to write opera that's not exclusive. I mean, it's for everybody and it's in English, so hopefully you can understand it and all that. But the choir world is very community based and very much a very collective experience, right? And operas can have choirs in the operas, but that's not the same thing. Right. It's a little different. So I feel like choir for Whitman is a really powerful thing. I think choir and Whitman work really well together.
Agreed, and we hear it in this music. I mean, your music is really proof of that. That somehow the bigness of this, right? And then it kind of, as you use the word nationalism before, you do feel that somehow, right? The power, the democracy, the vision of it. So there's a really big American feeling that I get.
Yeah, and I mean that, that word can sometimes imply something not good, and I mean that in the best possible way. Right. I mean nationalism like being proud, right? Being proud of your country and proud of the people here, and proud of being also. He was so optimistic. There was so much optimism, right? And at least some of the poems I was looking at, and I love that. I mean, we need more optimism. I don't know. Sometimes it's easy to get sad,
But I think one way to get that optimism is you're talking about this communal experiences within a choral society, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. I grew up. I was very lucky where I grew up in my hometown in the Bible Belt of Texas, and there was a choral society, Northeast Texas Choral Society, that they put on 2 concerts a year, and they are like a family. Where the operas I've done, you get close knit, how you do in a show, but like chorals are just insanely communal and familiar and family. But they also have, my grandmother would say in the Baptist church, you could always say when there was family singers, because they have family harmonies. Mm-hmm. In a choral, once you're there enough, you get that family harmony that allows the music. But I think with opera, this is my little opinion in the world, is that that opera is moving towards more choral. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember the title of the show. Maybe it was called As One. In Memphis.
Yeah, As One. That's by
is that about the trans?
Yes, person? About the trans the character.
Yeah.
And it's by, oh my God.
I can't think
of her name because
it's brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's very good. It's been done like 100 times.
Yeah,
more, like 200 times. Yeah,
that was done, and then Opera Memphis also did one.
Laura Kaminsky. Sorry,
yes,
Laura Kaminsky, and one of the writers was Mark Campbell, who I've worked with on 2 different projects. Yeah, no, that was great. Anyway, yeah,
it's beautiful. And then Memphis also did one about these vets, and I can't remember what that one's called, but it was more choral than it was opera. Yet when you do something that's more choral, it's community based, and the audience feels as if their voice is also being heard. While when you're in an opera, you're just listening. You're not actively a participant.
Right.
But I think your music lends that to it, that it's not just for the singer or that character, it's for the person listening. It is your America that you can have pride in for a better day, a better this, a better that,
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Tristan. Thank you. I think some composers write music that feels like you have to be part of a club to understand it. That's totally fine. I think there's room for all of it in this world if that's what you want to create. The way I compose, I try to view it as a more, like you said, like a communal experience, and I want to take people in rather than push them away. And because some composer, I think this is a weird thing to say, but they're obsessed with intelligence in a sense, like, oh, look how complicated this can be. Look how smart I am. That's okay. I mean, I guess I've kind of gotten past that. Like, I don't think I need to prove that. What I want to prove, though, what I'm most concerned with Whitman's work or else otherwise is to move people emotionally. Mm-hmm. I want people to feel like they had an emotional or moving experience, whether it was positive or negative, something that made them feel differently, and hopefully enjoy it. It sounds simplistic, but I think that so many creators in modern contemporary art aren't necessarily thinking that. They have another agenda. So I guess we're all different. It all depends. And Whitman's work, I don't know. I just feel like he was always, that was it. I mean, you read his stuff and you always feel like you want to be part of it. You never feel like he's pushing you away. You feel like he's trying to bring you in, right?
And I mean, I don't think what you're saying sounds simplistic at all. It sounds like Whitman, actually, to speak in the language really used by by everyday people,
Right.
and to deliver a message that people can hold on to. I mean, this poem that you said, "I Hear America Singing," is all about that. I'm looking at the clock, guys. Look at us going. Rob, look what you did. Like, we're totally
Sorry.
into you.
Thank you.
We like to keep the show to an hour. I know we've run over a bit, but I'm sure the listeners will forgive us for this because it's a fascinating conversation, and I'm getting a lot of really deep impressions of your music. Maybe just one last thing, Rob,
Sure.
because we always have a lot of young people listen to the show, and they're interested in different walks of life and how people got there and what they did. Do you have any advice for an aspiring musician or composer out there, like something to hold on to for young people that are hoping to do kind of what you have done?
Sure, thank you. I think the most important aspect of, if I could say one thing over all these years, is that do it because you love it and you're in love with creating or recreating or just doing art, whatever form it is, whether it's writing in text or with music or whatever. And I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in whatever the people think of what you're doing, meaning awards, whether you get a job or not, or commission or something, or, printed in a magazine somewhere if you're a poet. But I think what's really important is that you love what you do. I said, you've got to love it first. And that doesn't mean writing for other people. It just means loving what you do, because then other people will follow if you're in love with it. But you have to be 110% in love with what you're doing. That's it. I mean, so many people are obsessed with other things. I think that's the most important thing, is to fall in love with what you're creating. Yeah.
What a great thought to end with. And I think you represent that so well, Rob, to just love what you do, because I think that kind of passion and enthusiasm is contagious. And it's also very difficult to fake that, just to fake real passion and real enthusiasm. And that definitely comes through in Whitman's America. I, for one, am thrilled that it's coming to Carnegie Hall on November 15th. And will you be there?
Oh, yeah, of course. Are you kidding? That's so, for a composer, that's about as good as it gets in America, other than, a few other places like Lincoln Center or LA or places like that,
So do you think we could meet you in person? That
absolutely.
Would be so
I would love
lovely
that.
To do
and
that.
If any of you are out there and you find me there, please come up and say hi. I'd love to meet you. I'm very friendly and approachable, and I'll be hanging out, I'm sure, a little bit after, so please,
Oh my goodness, how great. Thank you so much, Rob. And
sure, thank you.
What a fascinating person and conversation. Tristan, you just completely just up the ante with all of your lovely commentary and also your sincere enthusiasm. That's also
Absolutely
to be applauded. Hear, hear. Thank you, listeners, for just tuning in. We obviously had fun, even if you weren't there. But we are awfully glad that you were. And we'll see you again next month. Meanwhile, just love what you do. We're going by Rob Paterson's words.